In this video, we are going to talk about something many older adults in America understand all too well, the feeling of being left behind. After a lifetime of raising children, working hard, and making sacrifices, many seniors discover that old age is not filled with peace and family gatherings like they once imagined. Instead, it often brings loneliness, financial struggles, or the painful silence of children who no longer call as often as they used to. But here's the truth I want you to remember: you are not invisible, and you are not without worth. Your value is not measured by what you can give or do for others today. It comes from the life you have lived, the wisdom you carry, and the strength that has brought you this far. Even if people around you don't always see it, your presence still matters. The story I'll be sharing today is about Martha, a woman who gave everything to her family and ended up feeling invisible. But her story is not just about pain, it is about finding courage, choosing herself, and discovering peace later in life. And maybe, as you listen, you will recognize parts of your own story too. Before we start, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Just drop your state or city in the comments below. Point 1, the loss. When we think about growing older, most of us imagine it will be a time of peace. We picture sitting with our partner on the porch, enjoying quiet evenings, or gathering with our children and grandchildren on weekends. We imagine a home filled with laughter, comfort, and the feeling that all our sacrifices have finally paid off. But for many, the reality looks very different. Instead of peace, old age can bring sudden loss, loneliness, and changes we never expected. Martha's life is one example of this. She had always believed her later years would be spent with her husband by her side. She thought they would grow old together, share meals, and watch their son build his future. But that dream ended the day her husband never came home from work. His death wasn't just the loss of a partner, it was the loss of a whole life they had planned together. What followed was not only grief, but struggle. The payout she received from the company was small, barely enough to cover basic needs. It was as if decades of her husband's hard work had been reduced to a single check, and that pain stayed with her. With bills to pay, a house to maintain, and a son still in high school, she had no choice but to carry on alone. This is the kind of loss many older adults know too well. It's not just about losing someone you love, it's about losing the security, the comfort, and the future you had imagined. Suddenly, you are left with silence where there used to be conversation, and responsibilities that feel heavier with each passing day. For Martha, every room in her house reminded her of what she had lost. The kitchen table where they once shared meals now felt empty. The porch that once held quiet evenings together became a place she couldn't bring herself to sit. It is in these small, everyday details that grief shows its weight. Loss in old age is more than one event, it changes the way life feels. And like Martha, many seniors are left asking, how do I carry on when the future I counted on is no longer there? Point 2, the sacrifice. One of the most common experiences for parents, especially as they grow older, is realizing just how much they sacrificed for their children. Many of you know this feeling: you go without so your kids can have more, you put aside your own dreams so theirs can come true, and you give until there is almost nothing left for yourself. At the time, it feels natural. It feels like love. But when those sacrifices are forgotten, it leaves a deep ache. Martha lived her whole life around sacrifice. After losing her husband, she did everything she could to keep her son's future bright. Money was tight, but she worked hard, saved where she could, and made sure he never felt the full weight of her struggles. When he finished high school and wanted to move to the city, she encouraged him, even though her heart wanted to keep him close. She knew he had big dreams and she didn't want to hold him back. Before he left, she even handed him money she had saved over months by cutting corners. And later, when he called and asked for help with buying a small apartment, she gave him everything she had left, the money from his father's accident. That payout had been her only safety net, the one bit of financial security she could count on. But instead of keeping it for herself, she transferred it all to her son. She told herself it was for both of them, that one day he would bring her to live with him, and they would share in his new life. This is something many older adults understand: you give without keeping score. You tell yourself it's worth it just to see your child happy. You convince yourself you don't need much, as long as they are doing well. But the truth is, when those sacrifices are not appreciated, it hurts more than anyone can imagine. For Martha, each dollar she gave away carried with it not just money, but pieces of her hope, her trust, and her belief that her son would always remember what she had done. The sacrifice was not only financial, it was emotional. And like many parents, she gave all of it without asking for anything in return. Point 3. The invisible mother. One of the most painful parts of growing older is not the physical aches or even the financial struggles, it is the feeling of becoming invisible to the very people you love most. Many older parents know this pain. At first, your children call, they visit, they share their lives with you. But slowly, without you even realizing it, the calls grow shorter, the visits less frequent, and the space between you begins to widen. You are still here, but it feels like no one notices anymore. This was exactly what happened to Martha. When her son first moved to the city, he called her every week. He told her about his new job, the noise and energy of the city, and the excitement of starting fresh. She felt proud, even comforted, because his voice kept her connected to him. But as time went on, the calls became less regular. Sometimes he answered when she called, sometimes he didn't. More and more, it was Martha who had to reach out, and even then, the conversations felt rushed, as if he didn't have the time. Still, she tried to show her love in the ways she knew how. She baked cookies and mailed them in little packages. She knitted socks for the winter and tucked handwritten notes inside, with simple words like, "Stay warm" or "Don't forget to eat." She even slipped in small amounts of money when she could, believing that every little bit might help him. For her, these were not just gifts, they were reminders that she was still his mother, still thinking of him every single day. But the hardest moment came when she learned about his wedding. Not through him, not through a joyful phone call, but from a neighbor. Imagine opening an envelope addressed to you by mistake, only to discover that your own child was getting married, and you hadn't been told. Martha still went, quietly, dressed in her best clothes, sitting at the very back of the chapel. But her son never once looked her way. She sat there, watching from a distance, as if she didn't exist at all. This is the kind of invisibility many seniors know. You are present, but not seen. You love, but are not included. And the silence, more than anything else, makes you feel like you have faded from your own child's life. Point 4. The betrayal. There is a kind of pain deeper than silence. Silence hurts, but betrayal cuts through the heart. For many older parents, the greatest wound is not just being forgotten, but being treated as if all their years of love and sacrifice mean nothing. This was the reality for Martha. The day she learned she had become a grandmother should have been one of joy. A new baby in the family, her first grandchild, a moment most grandparents dream of. But instead of hearing the news from her son, she heard it from a neighbor. A passing comment, spoken casually, telling her that her son's wife had given birth to a little girl. That moment stole her breath. She sat in shock, realizing her son hadn't even bothered to call. No photo, no message, not even a word. With trembling hands, Martha picked up the phone. But it wasn't her son who answered, it was her daughter-in-law. The voice on the other end was cold, almost annoyed. Martha tried to sound happy as she said, "I just heard about the baby. I didn't know." The reply cut like a knife, "We've been busy. Jacob has a lot going on. We didn't have time to update everyone." Martha swallowed her pain and offered, "I could have helped. I would have been there." But instead of gratitude, she heard sharpness, "If you really want to help, you can come and take care of the baby. We need someone during the week. But if you're too old to help, then maybe you shouldn't expect anything from us." Those words were worse than any silence. In that moment, Martha realized she was no longer seen as a mother or grandmother, but only as someone useful, or useless. After a lifetime of giving, she was being told that her value depended only on what she could still provide. This is a pain many older adults carry in silence. To feel reduced to what you can do, instead of who you are, is betrayal in its cruelest form. For Martha, this moment was a breaking point. She had given everything, her love, her money, her years, and now she was being discarded. Betrayal, more than loneliness, showed her the truth: she was no longer wanted, only tolerated when needed. Point 5. The turning point. Every life has a moment when something inside you changes. For Martha, that moment came after the cruel phone call with her daughter-in-law. She hung up the phone and sat in silence, the words echoing in her mind: "If you're too old to help, maybe you shouldn't expect anything from us." That was the instant when she realized she could no longer keep waiting for love that wasn't coming back. For days, she moved through her house like a shadow. She didn't cry, she didn't shout, she just stopped. She stopped checking the phone. She stopped preparing little packages. She stopped holding on to routines that were built around someone else. Instead, she began asking herself a new question: what about me? That simple question opened her eyes. She had always lived for others, for her husband, for her son, for her family. But who was living for her? For the first time in years, she allowed herself to think differently. She was not just a mother. She was not just someone's caregiver or someone's backup plan. She was still a person, with dignity, with worth, and with the right to peace. That is when Martha made the boldest decision of her life. She sold the old farmhouse. The house was filled with memories, but also with loneliness. Every corner reminded her of what she had lost. Packing it up was painful, but it was also freeing. She carefully wrapped her husband's photo, kept a few treasures, and let go of the rest. With the money she made, she began searching for a small apartment in town, a place where she could start fresh. This was not about revenge or bitterness. It was about survival. More than that, it was about self-respect. For Martha, the turning point was not loud or dramatic, it was quiet but powerful. She finally chose herself. And this is something many seniors need to hear: it is never too late to make that choice. No matter how many years have passed, you still have the right to put yourself first. Martha's turning point was simple but life-changing: she stopped waiting for others and decided to live for herself. Point 6. The rebirth. Starting over in later life can feel overwhelming. Many older adults think it's too late, that change belongs to the young. But Martha's story shows us that new beginnings are possible at any age. Her rebirth didn't come from wealth, or family suddenly returning, but from something much stronger: her own decision to live differently. Her new apartment was small. Just one bedroom, a narrow kitchen, and thin walls where she could hear the footsteps of her neighbors. But to her, it was more than enough. It was hers. Unlike the farmhouse, it wasn't filled with memories of disappointment or silence that pressed heavy on her chest. Instead, it offered a clean slate, a chance to create a life that belonged to her. Martha found purpose in the simplest of things. She began working at a local church, cleaning in the early mornings. The pay was modest, just enough for groceries and bills, but the work gave her structure. She would walk to the church with her little radio in her pocket, mop the floors, dust the pews, and light a few candles. Sometimes, she sat in the back row before leaving, not always to pray, but simply to breathe. That quiet moment each morning reminded her she was still here, still alive, and still capable of peace. She also began small rituals for herself. She planted herbs on her windowsill, bought herself flowers on Fridays, and treated herself to tea in the evenings. She no longer waited by the phone or held her breath for a letter that never came. At first, the silence from her son hurt, but slowly she realized it was no longer her prison, it was her freedom. This was Martha's rebirth. Not the life she had once imagined, but one she created with her own hands. A life filled with little joys, quiet dignity, and peace that came not from others, but from within. And that is the truth many seniors forget: it doesn't matter how old you are, you can still begin again. Peace is not something people have to give you, it is something you can choose for yourself. Martha chose it, and so can you. Martha's story may sound unique, but the truth is, it is the story of many older adults in America. After years of sacrifice, hard work, and love, too many mothers and fathers find themselves overlooked in the very years they thought would finally bring rest. Some are left without savings or pensions, some are left without a partner, and many are left waiting for phone calls or visits that never come. And that waiting, that silence, can make you feel as though you no longer matter. But Martha's journey shows something powerful. She lost her husband, she gave everything to her son, and she faced the sharp pain of being forgotten. Yet even in that loneliness, she discovered something important: she still had herself. And that was enough to build a new life. By choosing to leave behind what no longer served her, she found peace in her own way. She learned that dignity does not come from how others treat you, it comes from how you choose to see yourself. If you are listening right now and you feel invisible, let Martha's story be a reminder: you are not alone. There are thousands of seniors just like you who feel the same ache, the same silence, the same sense of being left behind. But you are not broken, and you are not a burden. You are a person with wisdom, with strength, and with a story that still matters. It is never too late to begin again. It is never too late to create peace for yourself, whether through small daily routines, connecting with kind neighbors, or simply reminding yourself each morning that you are worthy of love and dignity. So the next time you feel invisible, remember this: you are not. Your life still holds value, your voice still matters, and your presence still has meaning. Just like Martha, you can choose yourself, even now. And when you do, you'll see that you were never truly alone.